of staff of the governor, and I told him exactly what was going on and that my intention was to call in the DCI to conduct the investigation because they were an outside agency with statewide criminal jurisdiction. And I couldn't have the appearance of us trying to investigate ourselves when we had these explosive allegations going on. So I know that the chief of staff mentioned it to the governor because he told me he had. And then when I saw the governor next in person, I told him about it, and I also expressed my concern that the DOJ was dragging their feet and not getting us the help that we needed. And I repeated that to the governor just about every time I saw him personally going over the next year almost.
Now, it factors in eventually into your employment story, but for the sake of our audience, what is DCI and what was your prior role at DCI? It would seem to indicate you would have an understanding of the workings of DCI, but I'll let you expand upon the thought. Ed Wall, please.
Yes, I did have a little bit of knowledge of it. I came to Wisconsin to join the Division of Criminal Investigation as a special agent, was promoted to senior special agent, to special agent in charge, and ultimately became the administrator of the division. So I ran the entire agency under the Attorney General's office and working in the DOJ. So there weren't a whole lot of people who knew better what the capabilities of the agency were and what the investigation should have run like. When we called the DCI in through the Attorney General, we anticipated it would be a robust and quick investigation because, you know, think about it. You had allegations that kids in state custody and in our care were being harmed by state employees. There's really not much worse than that I can think of that would have said, you know, you need to put all of your resources in investigating this quickly. And that's exactly what I expected them to do. What ended up happening was they assigned one agent to it who worked it part-time for about 8-9 months before a second agent started to help working part-time. And they didn't devote really any resources beyond, you know, doing an occasional interview until the youth got injured up there when the door was slammed on his toes. So that's when the DCI kicked into gear, and at the order of Attorney General Schimmel, they sent 50 agents up there in a knee-jerk reaction to do interviews and take reports and things. So Schimmel now falls back to saying, well, we did 700, you know, reports and 600 interviews and this and that. And the key question to ask them is, what were the dates? Because none of it happened until, most of it didn't happen, let me say that, until the kid got hurt. And that was when they realized that they had a CYA issue on their hands that they needed to deal with quickly.
Folks, you're listening to the Devil's Advocates radio show on Real Resistance Radio. Ed Wall, he's the former corrections secretary. He has written the book Unethical Life in Scott Walker's Cabinet and the Dirty Side of Politics. Ed, so specifically, what were the dates between notification and the action that Schimmel took? How much time went by?
So we originally notified the DOJ that we were looking at these issues in December of 2014. We officially made the request when my administrator of the Juvenile Corrections Division and my deputy secretary came to tell me they had identified potential officers involved in potential youth. Initially, the kids didn't want to talk. As soon as we got that information, while they were still in my office, I picked up the phone and called the administrator of the DCI at the time, Dave Matthews, and told him that we needed him to take the investigation, and he pushed back a little bit, which surprised me, and kind of thought that, well, this is an internal affairs investigation. And I said, no, it's not. I said, this is an issue. We might have kids who were criminally harmed anywhere in the state, and the DCI was the only agency with statewide criminal jurisdiction. Eventually, they did say that they would take it, and it was only a matter of a week or two when my deputy secretary came to me and said, there's something wrong here. These guys are dragging their feet, and they don't want to share any information with us. And it got so bad that within the first month, my deputy secretary demanded that we have biweekly calls with the DOJ so that they could update us. And there is going to be posted, and I've got to just check to see if this document went up yet, the DOC timeline on the investigation, which details everything that the DOC was doing. And it's obvious when you read our timeline that we were very busy trying to contain this. The DOJ refuses to this day to release any information, any timelines, or anything else. When I finally demanded that they come to my office to brief us because of some of the things that we were hearing, they came down with the deputy attorney, or not the deputy, the senior counsel, Paul Connell, and the chief of legal services, and the DCI folks came down, and they sat at my conference table, and they opened by saying, well, we've had 5 kids who've had their arms broken. And I stopped him right there, and I turned to my staff, and I said, I'm aware of 3 kids. And my administrator of juvenile services said, yes, sir, there were only 3. And I turned back to the assistant attorney general conducting this, and I said, Chris, we only have 3. And I said, you do have the medical records for these kids, don't you? And he just looked very uncomfortable down and then said, no, we don't. And I said, you've been investigating this for over 10 months, and you haven't even requested the medical records for kids who you think have broken arms? And he didn't say anything. And I said, well, please tell me that you have at least the incident reports surrounding the injuries to the kids so that you understand what the circumstances were. Because in every case where the kids' arms were broken is when they were violent and fighting and we're trying to get them into custody. And kids' wrists and things break pretty easy, and they're trying to get them in handcuffs because they're tearing someplace up. And they hadn't even requested an incident report. And I said to him, well, what are you basing your allegations on? And they said, well, we interviewed some kids and we found them credible. And I don't want to, cast any shade on the kids, but the fact of the matter was, I told them, 100% of the females and 85% of the males have diagnosed serious mental health issues. Have you looked into, how do you interview kids properly with those kind of concerns? Nothing. So that's what we were dealing with. They basically were trying to punt the case to the feds beginning in around November, December of 2015, and finally got the feds to take it in January of 2016. And the reason they wanted to get it to the feds was very simply, they'd investigated it for a year, and this is the final question that I asked them in that meeting in my conference room: do you have enough to charge a single person with a crime? And they said no. So the Attorney General was very conscious of the fact that the spotlight was about to turn on him. The state had expended by that time millions of dollars in response to the issues at Lincoln Hills between body cameras and putting additional cameras up and overtime and more people. We had about 18 people on paid administrative leave for months because the DOJ wouldn't share information with us, and we didn't know what we could do with them. So they knew that they were going to be called to answer for all of the money and all of the effort they put in, and they didn't have a single person that they could charge. And that was the reason that they wanted to get it to the feds. They make the statement that the feds came in and took the case. That was not the case at all. Paul Connell started telling us probably November, December that, this might be a case for the federal government to investigate. And I, myself, and even the chief of staff said, why would the federal government investigate this? And that's still a question nobody can answer. And now the federal government has had it over 2 years, and you're not hearing anything. No. And I don't think you will hear anything until after the election, which is exactly what they planned to begin with. Connell, Schimmel, and Walker both have the reasons for wanting this thing to disappear, but the fact of the matter is it won't disappear. And, the fact that they went and they finally implemented a plan that we suggested to them in the summer of 2015, which was to convert Lincoln Hills to a minimum security adult institution, and I wanted to reopen Ethan Allen. And they pushed back against that because, well, Governor Walker had closed Ethan Allen, and he didn't want to admit that he was wrong. So it was quite a crumbling story.
Wow. Well, Ed, there was no public admission by Scott Walker until December of 2015, after the failure of his presidential campaign. Sir, do you have a few more minutes? We'd love to talk a little bit more about this.
You can have me as long as you want.
All right.
Outstanding, Ed. Don't tell your wife. We'll come back with Ed Wall, the former Secretary of the Department of Corrections and the author of a book, Unethical, Life in Scott Walker's Cabinet and the Dirty Side of Politics, and more evidence coming to light at the website each and every day, unethicalbook.com. Find it and stick around. More Ed Wall and Devil's Advocates on the other side.
Boy, this looks like very big stuff.
I'm an Eagle Scout.
Brad Zog, owner of Zero Res Madison. Brad, why should people use Zero Res Madison?
Why wouldn't you clean your carpets like this? We've got a patented system. We also do another step that most people don't do. We have a double rotating brush machine that we use when we pre-treat the carpet. So this helps dig up any of that stuff that's deeper in your carpet that the vacuum doesn't get. We're going to provide that intermediary step before we clean with our empowered water.
Call Zero Res today, 608-848-9000. Zero Res. Spell it forward or backward. It's the right way to clean.
Hey everyone, it's your nominee for Lieutenant Governor, Mandela Barnes. I know I don't need to tell you what's at stake with this election, but I want to talk to you about my friend and running mate, Tony Evers. Now, I've gotten to know Tony over the last couple months as we've crisscrossed the state. I've seen his resolve and his dedication to solving the problems Wisconsin faces, especially when it comes to access to quality, affordable health care, protecting our environment, and making sure that every kid in Wisconsin has a great public school, regardless of their zip code. But Tony and I can't win this election alone. We need your help to talk to those that might still be on the fence. So whatever you can do will help. Knock on doors, talk to your neighbors, talk to your family. When we're fighting to take back the state from Scott Walker and the special interests, every little bit helps. You can make the difference in this election. So visit TonyEvers.com and sign up to help. It's time for a change. And that's why Tony for Wisconsin paid for this ad.
In-person absentee voting is now available in the state of Wisconsin. I want to encourage you. Go vote early. September 24th, voting begins in Milwaukee. Check with your city clerk to find out more. Vote now because you never know what might come up on Election Day. Secure your vote early. The more people who vote early, the easier it will be on Election Day for voters who can't. So go vote, Wisconsin. The polls are open now. This message brought to you by our friends at Wisconsin Voices.
The Devil's Advocates, where there's always time for Scott Walker bashing. Hashtag Walker bashing.
And we are back. Thank you for listening to the Devil's Advocates radio show on Real Resistance Radio. If you missed any of this fine program or just want to go back and relive, you can check out the website, realresistanceradio.com. You can download and listen to podcasts and interviews.
Dominic, this interview continues with a fine guest. His name, Ed Wall. He was the former Department of Corrections Secretary under Scott Walker. I should write that down, Ed. I might remember better. But more importantly, I got your book, sir. It's entitled Unethical, Life in Scott Walker's Cabinet and the Dirty Side of Politics. And Ed, there is a news crew up at WSAW Channel 7. I assume that's Wausau. They questioned. They wanted you to verify the veracity of what you had said. And I'm going to reference some of their reporting. I'm going to quote you from George Camp. George Camp is a retired executive director of the National Nonprofit Association of State Correctional Administrators. And he told Channel 7, what Mr. Wall had shared with you is the truth. He was concerned and wanted to make improvements, and I felt he was very sincere and genuine. But Ed, you called this outside agency. You asked them to come in and effectively do what on behalf of Lincoln Hills? And then why did you have to call them back and say, never mind, forget it, we don't want this outside investigation, outside advice? What were you asking for, and why did you tell them never mind?
So the governor's office was aware that I was sending that letter to ask. As a matter of fact, they are the ones who recommended to me that we looked for an outside assessment of the center. And I said, well, ASCA, which I was a member of, it's basically the 50 state secretaries for corrections in the country, and they have a very dedicated staff that does this kind of thing. They come into states and do assessments. And I wrote a letter to them asking them to do a thorough assessment, basically of every aspect of the juvenile corrections system, from the rules of incarceration to what the segregation time was, how we treated the kids with mental health, how we provided them with recreation time, with counseling, with just about everything you can imagine. And I sent the letter to them. I called the governor's office to notify them that I had sent the letter. George Camp, who was the executive director, had called me to verify that, that I had sent it, and I said yes. And then they called me the next day and told me to cancel the request. And I said, well, what are you talking about? And they said, cancel the request. We don't want them to do the review. I said, well, You just told me you wanted to do the review. Yeah, well, we've changed our mind. What I think they really wanted was to have the spectacle saying that we had requested an outside review, but then they didn't want the review information coming back. And it was outrageous to me. And I called George, and I was very disheartened at this. I thought that maybe finally the governor's office was going to engage here, that they were going to, take some positive steps. And they said, cancel the review. And Governor Walker's claim that he knew nothing about it is absolutely ridiculous. He knew what was going on in this case for the entire year.
And Ed, during 2015, that was sort of Scott Walker's lost year. He was, serving the state of Wisconsin 15 minutes a day, staff call, and the rest of the time he was running for president full time. Now, do you think the fact that he was running for president, if I recall correctly, Ed, in a prior appearance on this show, you told us Scott Walker didn't even want to discuss the Department of Corrections budget with you. He canceled the meeting to discuss the budget because he didn't want any conversation during his presidential run about the failures at Lincoln Hills. Did I get that part right,
That's
Ed?
correct. You did. So what happens is we're coming into the budget process. So the budget process for every state agency is a lot of work. And in every state agency, as you come towards September, October, has an opportunity to sit down with the governor, with their budget staff, and pitch for the different projects that they have so that the governor will consider them for placing into his budget to the legislature. So we routinely write, any place from 15 to 30 budget papers requesting funding for various projects. And in September, when I was supposed to meet with the governor, and everything with Lincoln Hills was on the paper every day, his chief of staff, Rich Zipper, called me and said, we're canceling your budget meeting with the governor. And I said, well, Rich, we have some very significant things we have to discuss, primary among them, Lincoln Hills, and the money that we have to put toward, fixing the problems there. And he said, well, we're not going to have him meet with you. We don't want you anywhere near him right now. And we don't want it on his calendar that he's meeting with the DOC because people are immediately going to think that he's talking to you about Lincoln Hills and we're going to get inundated with questions.
Ed, I know we're out of time here, but please give people the website once again where you're putting out new evidence every day.
Sure. It's unethicalbook.com, unethicalbook.com, and they can go there and see everything they want to see.
We are the Devil's Advocates. Thank you, Ed Wall. That book, Unethical Life in Scott Walker's Cabinet in the Dirty Side of Politics. Phone lines open now, 844-967-2789.
Join the resistance against dirty carpets. Call Zero Res Madison today for our summer special. Clean and sanitize 3 rooms for only $139. Call 608-848-9000 or schedule online at ZeroResMadison.com. Zero Res, spell it forward or backward, it's the right way to clean.
You're not wired to have a response to this sound. But when we introduce a new stimulus, Save the Food, we're helping to stop food waste. Save the Food. For tips and recipes, visit SaveTheFood.com. Brought to you by NRDC and the Ad Council.
180 over 111, and I had a stroke. I couldn't speak or walk.
This is high blood pressure. Get back on your plan. Go to loweryourhbp.org. Brought to you by the American Stroke Association, American Medical Association, and the Ad Council.
5nines, your local single-source IT solutions provider. Specializing in cloud technology, consulting, servers, networks, and hosting. We manage your IT so you can focus on running your business. Enjoy technology. Enjoy 5nines.com.
You are listening to Real Resistance Radio, WRRD 1510 AM Waukesha and WTTN 1580 AM Columbus. Always streaming at realresistanceradio.com.
Do you own a rental property, or would you like to partner with a rental investment team? Call the pros you can trust at CCL Management. Rental expertise second to none, a general contractor on staff to direct repairs and improvements, and real estate brokerage services tailored to the small investor. If you're ready to invest in rental property or just need professionals to manage your real estate portfolio, call us, CCL Management, at 608-833-0009 or visit us on the web at cclmanagement.com.
Adopt US Kids presents Multiple Choice Parenting.
Your daughter just had her first breakup. Do you A, put yourself in her shoes?
How could he do this to you? And for Sheila, she has split ends.
B, console her.
Oh, sweetie, this is going to happen a lot. 4, maybe 5 more times before you get married.
C, take charge.
Got to get this all straightened out. Keep a little talking to, man, mano a mano. Hey, Steve! Is now a good time? No? Okay, no problem. Bye.
Or D, help her find a new boyfriend.
I know a great place to meet boys. The internet. Nice, single boys. Never mind. How about some ice cream?
As a parent, there are no perfect answers. But you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
For more information on how you can adopt, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
The Devil's Advocates.
James Santel, he's a former U.S. attorney. He's our guest live on Brady.
Once again, a pleasure to be with you, gentlemen, to talk about the latest news breaking as we speak.
The FBI raided Michael Cohen, Trump's personal attorney, but once they got there, then they went back and got a more thorough warrant and said, we'll take everything.
My first reaction is you need to teach criminal constitutional law. You've got it just right in terms of the process.
They are kind of a big deal.
This is a really big deal.
For Real Resistance Radio, my name is Keith Gostad. A TV station is reporting that the Walker administration called off a request for an investigation into Wisconsin's youth prison. WSAW-TV is reporting that former Corrections Secretary Ed Wall requested an investigation of abuse from the Association of State Correctional Administrators at the teen prison. The reporting says the Walker administration told Wall to cancel his request. Wall, who resigned as the prison secretary in 2016, says that Walker knew about the problems at the prison long before the public was made aware of them. Wednesday, mostly cloudy, warm and windy, highs in the low 80s. Tonight, rain in the evening, clearing skies overnight, breezy with lows in the upper 40s. Thursday, sunshine, highs in the mid-50s. Friday, cloudy with a chance of rain, highs in the low 60s. For Real Resistance Radio, I am Keith Gostad.
The Devil's Advocates. Political commentary from the back of the class.
Welcome back to the Devil's Advocates radio show. Want to thank our most recent guest, a fine one indeed. He's become a friend. He was Ed Wall, former Department of Corrections Secretary and author of the new tell-all book, Unethical, Life in Scott Walker's Cabinet and the Dirty Side of Politics. And he spelled it with a $sign. Also, unethicalbook.com. Now, here's what I love about what Ed Wall's doing. He's offering ongoing evidence in real time when someone says, hey, can you back up this 240-page tell-all? His answer is, yes, I can. I've got depositions. I've got evidence of all sorts. And let's not forget, Attorney General Brad Schimmel wants to dismiss this man. He's just a disgruntled former employee who got fired for trying to evade open records laws. Well, that's not entirely correct. In fact, that is something of a fabrication. Ed Wall headed up the DCI. When Ed Wall was first offered the job as Secretary of the Department of Corrections, said no thanks. I'm currently in a probationary period over at DCI, and if I don't work my way through that probationary period, I will not have a job to come back to. Because let's not forget, DOC, cabinet secretaries, that's a political appointment.
Right.
That's at the gubernator's whim. So, Ed Wall's waited, garnered tenure, whatever it's called, over at DCI, garnered the right to come back and refill his old job, but apparently Brad Schimmel wanted to put a crony in there. And Brad Schimmel didn't want Ed Wall working at DCI, and Brad Schimmel used this explanation that Ed Wall had given a letter to Rich Zipperer, chief of staff then for Scott Walker, a letter talking about his going back to his prior position at DCI. The letter had nothing to do with Lincoln Hills. And the fact that he said, hey, this is a draft letter, and if you want to, you can dispose of it, you can shred it at the end, was not an effort to evade open records laws in the state of Wisconsin. Scott Walker knows quite a bit about that. It was simply an effort for the man to get the job back, which he was legally entitled to under Wisconsin state law. And, you know, we talk about who do you believe. I got to tell you, as I've gotten to know this man, I believe Ed Wall. Ed Wall has not blanched. He has supported his assertions with evidence, let's call it, Dom. And Governor Scott Walker, even if he could plausibly deny knowing all the way back in 2012 about the abuses going on at Lincoln Hills, even if he can claim that his chief of staff didn't give him the letter from the Racine County judge, he didn't go public with this until December of 2015, long after, months after, he ended his failed presidential candidacy. Scott Walker covered this up purposefully, and any accusations against Ed Wall for being a destroyer of public records? I mean, Scott Walker tried to take public records out of the state's constitution. That's not the reason. They wanted Wall gone. They wanted him gone before he wrote the letter. And if you don't believe me, go to the unethicalbook.com. The evidence, it lays it out pretty clearly. The depositions, this chapter, the unpublished chapter, is all about the story of how Ed Walls got fired. And I would say how he got fired for being a whistleblower.
Yes, absolutely. Whistleblower is the correct term. And Governor Walker and Attorney General Schimmel continue to cover this up. There is a federal investigation ongoing for years now. Who called it? What's the status? I would sure like to know, because we're talking about juveniles. We're talking about kids, the majority of which, what did I say, 100% of the female juveniles have some sort of mental disorder, have issues. These are kids that need help, and they're getting abused, or were getting abused, and they were not getting the proper attention required by a governor and by an attorney general, and it is shameful, and there should be an investigation. And I believe truly that there is a cover-up and there is data, certainly within the Department of Justice, that should come to light. Again, a shameful act against children by this administration.
Well, Governor Scott Walker, election year Scott Walker, has even embraced the Democratic proposal, effectively the Ed Wall proposal, put forth by Evan Goyke. Suddenly he's all down for that, down for Dems.
Now he is.
Let's brush it under the rug and move on to more important issues like Tony Evers is going to raise your taxes. Well, Dom, I got another headline. This one perhaps less important than the abuse against juvenile offenders at Lincoln Hills, but still is a clear example of election year Walkerism. This one, committee to vote on scrapping chronic wasting disease rules. Todd Richmond at the AP reports. Republicans on the legislature's rule committee debated whether to break with Governor Scott Walker and scrap his new emergency chronic wasting disease regulations for deer. We got a big CWD problem in the state of Wisconsin. Scott Walker has effectively done bubkiss about it for 8 years, but now it's an election season, and he's got emergency rules, Tom.
Oh, great.
Now, the Legislative Rules Committee called the rules too expensive and cumbersome, and Republican State Rep Adam Jarkow told the committee during a hearing on the regulations that the rules are dumb and stupid, and Walker brought the rules forward in an effort to win votes. Here's another quote, Tom. What has changed in the last 3 months or 6 months or 9 months that requires an emergency response? I submit to you nothing has changed in that time, Jarkow said. Well, one thing has changed. There's an election in a month. It's a political stunt masquerading as policy. This is what Republican reps are saying about the governor's emergency response to the CWD. I read on from this piece. Walker has taken pointed criticism for doing little to nothing to contain CWD and protect Wisconsin's beloved white-tailed deer during his 8 years in office. With re-election looming, the governor earlier this year ordered the DNR to require deer farmers to upgrade fences. Yeah, that's a little too late. And ban hunters from moving deer carcasses out of CWD-affected counties. Well, that part is fairly cumbersome, as I talked to a few friends that hunt them. The rules took effect on an emergency basis Monday. Now, deer farmers have balked at the cost. Oh, poor deer farmers. And lawmakers say hunters are in an uproar over the carcass movement restrictions. That part's true. Senator Steve Nass, also Republican, co-chairman of the Joint Committee Review of Administrative Rules, called a hearing Monday to vote on suspending the rules. The hearing began at 10 a.m. and was still going on when this piece published at 5 p.m. of that day. Nass began the proceedings by complaining that the rule will restrict hunters from bringing their deer home if they live in another county, forcing them to butcher them in the woods. He said the rule was rushed and hunters don't know about it. He also cautioned that a new governor could come into office following the November elections and change course. I would almost predict that at this point, Dom. Jarko gave a charge speech during the committee predicting hunters will be so frustrated with the carcass movement rule that they'll just accept the citation if they're caught moving deer across county lines. Once again, a quote, Dom, "The rule is dumb," he said. "It's clumsily written and carries out a silly policy. It's so stupid. This rule won't stop the spread of CWD, but it will annoy hunters and make their sport less fun and more difficult."
Crudy, he also complained that the legislature should take the lead and no governor should write laws. The regulations are technically administrative rules, but they carry the force of law. Asked for comment on the debate, Walker's spokesman, Tom Evenson, said in a 2-sentence email to the Associated Press that the governor has worked to protect the state's hunting heritage and would keep working with all interested parties to fight CWD. Deer farmers lined up to tell the committee that they can't afford new fencing. Here's a quote. "I do not have the money to put up another fence," Michael Gillis, a deer farmer from Suamico, told the committee. "I'm tapped out. I'm 67 years old. I'm working nights to pay the bills. We're strapped. CWD is like cancer. You can eat all the right fruits and vegetables and everything, but it's going to happen. It's inevitable." The rules call for deer farms that have had a CWD infection to install a second fence or solid barrier. Build that wall, Crudy. CWD-free farms have 3 options: add a second fence, add a solid barrier, or add an electric fence. The DNR has estimated that farmers with CWD positives would collectively spend just under $900,000 to comply. The cheapest option for farmers with no infections would be electric fencing, but the agency estimated that would still cost a total of $1.3 million. Republicans insist the cost will be dramatically higher because the estimates don't include labor. Once again, Republicans absolutely discounting the value of labor. Labor and interest. I don't know what Republicans, where they learn their finances. I'll continue. The rule also bans hunters from moving dead deer from CWD-affected counties unless they're headed to taxidermists or meat processors. 55 of Wisconsin's 72 counties are considered CWD affected, meaning they've had either a confirmed case or are adjacent to a county that has.
Dominic, in the statement from Tom Evenson on behalf of Scotty Wanker, it says the governor has worked to protect the state's hunting heritage and would keep working with all interested parties to fight CWD. Well, let's talk for just a minute longer, Tom, about how Governor Scott Walker, preserved the hunting heritage in the state of Wisconsin. Our pal Ruth Conniff, when she was with the Isthmus way back in 2013, Dom, you remember the United Sportsman. The United Sportsman controversy was in many ways a familiar Walker administration scandal. All of the elements were there. A politically wired conservative group gets money thanks to its connections to state Republicans. In this case, a $500,000 grant slipped into the state budget to promote hunting, fishing, and trapping. Republicans connected with Walker throw over the normal competitive bidding process in order to steer money to their friends. The political nature of the deal could not be clearer. As Jason Stein of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel reports, United Sportsman has done lobbying work for a mine and political work for state Republicans, but it hasn't ever run a class on hunting or fishing, exactly the skills required by the grant. Dom, I read on from the Isthmus. After details emerged on the front pages of newspapers across the state about the group's president shooting a bear without a license, they call that poaching in the hunting world, Dom. Lying about it and trying to pin it on someone else, not to mention misrepresenting his group's tax-exempt status, the Walker administration was finally embarrassed enough to pull the plug. But what the whole United Sportsman scandal really shows is that the administration does not share Wisconsin values. And Dom, I believe that guy was Luke Hilgeman, right? He was the head of United Sportsman. You know what Luke Hilgeman was doing most recently when I last checked in on Luke Hilgeman?
No, what?
He was representing Judge Skronik. Scrotum. You remember that guy?
Oh, yes, the losing
Luke
Wisconsin
Hilgeman has
Supreme
become.
Court.
He is a political operative on behalf of the Republican Party, and he went on vacation in the last week of the race, right before Skronik got his ass kicked by Dalit on the ballot.
So back to United Sportsman Crudy. This is how the Republican Walker administration works to protect the hunting heritage of the state and works with interested parties by giving cronyism $500,000
for unqualified, incompetent political operatives.
Yeah.
You know, guys like Luke Hilgeman.
Yeah.
That's how you preserve it, Dom. Just a little crony capitalism. Here, have $500,000.
It's terrible. I mean, true hunters.
So what if you never
if you're a true hunter,
taught hunting before?
If you're
so
all
what if you know
about this,
nothing
if you're
about
the
fishing?
outdoors, if you appreciate Wisconsin's beautiful countryside, and you vote for this Republican, you are voting against your own interests. It's not about protecting the deer herd. It's about cashing out and helping his cronies with your tax dollars. You know, small government, efficient Republicans. No, they're not like that.
Scott Walker, quite the hunter. They put him in the Blaze Orange, run him out behind the mansion, do a photo op each and every year. I've never seen that the governor's registered a deer. Perhaps he's fearful of eating a deer that might be contaminated with CWD. Come back with us. More Devil's Advocates. We know what some people are doing this afternoon, but you fine folks are listening to us, so join us on the phones, 844-967-2789.
Rabbit season! Duck season!
It's really an honor to work with the NRA, not only in my state, but across the country.
Duck fire!
I'm Andy Buck, Field Representative with Painters and Allied Trades of Wisconsin. It's an issue that brings constant challenges for building contractors. How to find qualified painters, glazers, and drywall finishers. IUPAT knows what you want. A professional job performed by skilled workers who care about safety, training, and finishing strong. Workers who are reliable and ready on demand. Let IUPAT provide the people power that you need. You'll feel confident the job is finished right. Connect at IUPATDC7.com and finish strong.
You concerned about speaking up at work? Do you feel like you have no say in your day-to-day work routine? Join Teamsters Local 344. Call 414-258-4545. Get a seat at the table. Join your brothers and sisters in negotiating for better wages, hours, and working conditions, and be part of the most powerful union in North America. Teamsters Local 344 covers sales and service throughout Southeast Wisconsin and package and airlines statewide. Contact Teamsters Local 344 at 414-258-4545 or at local344.org.
Have a drink at Regano's Roman Coin. This neighborhood corner tavern is as classic as the street it occupies. Family owned and operated since 1966, Regano's Roman Coin is located in a former Pabst Tide House on historic Brady Street, serving an array of craft beers with a focus on Wisconsin breweries. Also, weekly drink specials, trivia on Wednesdays, seasonal sporting events, parties hosted for all occasions, and pet friendly. Open 11 a.m. Tuesday through Friday, 10 a.m. Saturday and Sunday, closed on Monday. Regano's Roman Coin, Milwaukee's pet friendly, cash only order and classic corner tavern.
The Forum, hosted by Sherwin Hughes, exclusively on Real Resistance Radio. Call in live at 844-967-2789 and give your thoughts, feelings, and opinions on local and national topics. Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. until 11 a.m., it will not be what you expect to hear, but we will definitely give you what you need to know. That's The Forum, hosted by Sherwin Hughes on Real Resistance Radio. Always streaming live on realresistanceradio.com.
The Devil's Advocates, because freedom.
And welcome back to the Devil's Advocates radio show, Real Resistance Radio. You can join us on the phones. Last segment, if you've got something to say, now is your opportunity at 844-967-2789.
Dominic, I got something to say. Just found this piece a few minutes ago, originally at the Detroit Free Press. I found it at the Journal-Sentinel Online. Enbridge. We've talked about Enbridge numerous times on this show, Dom. They got a big old pipeline.
They got a couple big old pipelines.
Well, running down the the spine of the state of Wisconsin. In Enbridge, this corporation has something of a bad reputation. And if you don't believe me, look at what happened in Michigan the last time Enbridge had a spill, $1 billion plus spill. I believe they're still fighting to not do the right thing, not clean it up in its entirety. But troubling news, as Keith Matheny at the Detroit Free Press reports, at least I find this troubling. The state of Michigan and Canadian oil transport giant Enbridge announced a deal Wednesday to build a new oil pipeline through the Straits of Mackinac, but in a tunnel 100 feet below the lake bottom where Lakes Michigan and Huron connect. What could possibly go wrong?
No worries, man.
The massive project would take 7 to 10 years and cost between $300 million and $650 million, with state officials emphasizing it would be Enbridge, not Michigan taxpayers, footing the bill. Then why is it, if they can afford, a $300 to $650 million tunnel, that Republican lawmakers in the state of Wisconsin will not allow individual counties to hold Enbridge accountable for getting basic liability insurance in case they spill? They got pumping stations all across Dane County, all across the Heartland, all across the state of Wisconsin, Dom. But Republicans, they say, don't worry. And no unnecessary regulations.
No.
Because, what's the chances we'd have an oil spill like they did in Michigan?
We're open for business, Crudy.
I read on. It would create a utility corridor, housing not only a new 30-inch Line 5 pipeline for oil and liquid natural gas through the Straits of Mackinac, but a utility corridor that could also include other companies' power lines, telecommunication cables, and similar infrastructure.
Wait. Hang on. So we're going to put power lines adjacent to flammable
natural gas lines.
Oh, that's a great idea. We should do that. Not
Dominic, the corridor would be large enough for vehicles to drive through under the lakes, apparently, allowing inspectors access to assess the condition of the pipeline. Now, when the spill happened, they have computers that assess the condition of the pipeline.
At the Enbridge spill in the Kalamazoo River.
Yes, but that one leaked for 18 hours, Tom. Unless you got somebody driving back and forth underneath the Straits of Mackinac each and every day, isn't it going to be the same safety precautions that they have taken historically like they did in Kalamazoo, Dom?
Yeah, when it spills, we'll clean it up. Maybe.
Under the agreement, Enbridge would build a utility corridor and upon completion, hand over its ownership to the Mackinac Bridge Authority, an independent state agency that operates the Mackinac Bridge and funds it through tolls. Enbridge would then be provided a 99-year lease for use of the corridor and would remain responsible for operating and maintaining the tunnel. Nothing like expecting the tenant to do all the work, Tom. The agreement includes provisions intended to reduce the likelihood of a leak from the existing pipes while the tunnel is built and to ensure close collaboration between Enbridge and the state after the new pipeline becomes operational, officials said. Among the provisions, underwater inspections to detect potential leaks and evaluate pipe coating, placement of cameras at the straits to monitor ship activity and help enforce a no anchoring zone, a pledge that Enbridge personnel will be available during the highway periods to manually shut down the pipeline if electronic systems fail, and steps to prevent leaks at the other places where Line 5 crosses waterways. And finally, Dom, the agreement also includes a process for dealing with the existing oil lines after they're deactivated, although it leaves open the question of how much of the pipe material will be removed. So that eyesore, once they replace the old pipes, that eyesore will still be there, Dom. It'll still be there rusting under the waters. The agreement would end uncertainty about the controversial 65-year-old Line 5 pipeline, improving Great Lakes and Michigan environmental protection and providing certainty for the Upper Peninsula energy supplies, said Michigan Department of Natural Resources Director Keith Craig, co-chair of Governor Rick Snyder's Pipeline Safety Advisory Board. It's a reasonable, thoughtful pragmatic solution. Well, if you say so.
Oh, come on. Rick Snyder in the state of Michigan?
Republicans.
You got to be kidding me.
It'll be just as good as the water in Flint.
Thank you very much, Crew. That's where I was going to go. This is the same Republican administration that changed the water from Lake Huron and the Detroit River to the Flint River, which caused, thousands and thousands of children to be exposed to lead, and a half a dozen people dying from Legionnaire's disease? That's the same administration that's pushing this project. I think perhaps my dear friends and family in Michigan, of course I was born in Metro Detroit, they may want to think twice about this.
Well, Dominic, I've got a quote, as the writing says, environmental groups were less enthusiastic. Here's a quote. Today, Governor Snyder cemented his disastrous legacy for the Great Lakes and the people of Michigan, said Sean McBarty, Michigan program organizer for the nonprofit Clean Water Action. Again, a quote, Dom. As his administration comes to a close, he announced a last-minute deal with Enbridge Energy that will succeed in keeping the Great Lakes at risk from a massive Line 5 oil spill for the foreseeable future. Republican solutions, buddy.
They fixed Flint yet? No, that's right. That's still a problem. But hell,
no, they have not fixed Flint, but they're soon to fix the Supreme Court, Dom. No, I haven't seen reporting. Is the FBI investigation, the supplemental, back on Kavanaugh yet?
I actually saw reporting from CNN about half hour ago that people were still being interviewed today, according to their sources.
Well, that doesn't mean they can't declare it done. Trump could just make a call down to the FBI and say, we're done here, boys. Pack it up, send the report, and move on.
Nothing to
we're
see.
We're the devil's advocates. There's always something to hear here, even if you can't see us, even if you don't use the Facebook live stream. But we're kind of sexy. We recommend you do. Want to thank our fine guests. They were sexy. Randy Bryce, the Iron Stache, the 1st Congressional District Democratic candidate, wants to replace Paul Ryan, and also Ed Wall. He was the former Department of Corrections Secretary and author of the fine book, I got mine right here, Dom, Unethical, Life in Scott Walker's Cabinet and the Dirty Side of Politics.
Where's my book?
It's still in my backpack. It's in my duffel bag. You'll get it some year. Thank you all for listening. Do it again tomorrow. Devil's Advocates Radio, right here on Real Resistance Radio. Have a good night. See you on the radio tomorrow.
The one thing we know, and they do say, anybody that runs against Trump suffers. That's the way it should be.
What do you got to do that's so f***ing important? You can't join the cult with me.
Well, you are all weirdos.
Do you love public education? Do you want to support your schools? Then you should support the people who make them work. You should support teachers and their unions. Teachers' working conditions are students' learning conditions, and when the school bell rings, it is crucial that teachers do not check their rights at the door.